Hey, I'm Scott Jones from Emeals, and you're listening to Real Food for Real Life. On this episode, I talk with Carolyn Ketchum from All Day I Dream About Food. She's also the best-selling author of the Everyday Ketogenic Kitchen Cookbook.
Ketogenic generally embraces a lot of fats, including animal fat and saturated fats, but we do shy away from sort of the man-made canola oils and vegetable oils that are actually not as good for us as we've been thinking for 50 or 60 years. But good fats from avocado oil and nuts and still butter and cheese. But yes, a cup of ranch dressing would not be on my daily menu.
This busy mom of three talks about her journey to keto after developing gestational diabetes, then dismantles some of the more popular myths around the keto diet. Now, before we get to the interview, I have a few housekeeping items. First, send us your questions and comments. We read all of them. And if you have a suggestion for a future guest or a potential topic, I'd love to know that too. You can find us on Twitter @Emeals using the hashtag #AskEmeals. We also have an email address. It's community@emeals.com. If you don't already subscribe to our podcast, subscribe today. It's simple to do. You can find us at itunes.com/podcast/Real Food for Real Life. And while you're there, leave us a review. And finally, if you'd like more information on Emeals and our variety of meal plan food styles, you can find us at emeals.com. Try any of our meal plans free for 2 weeks, be it paleo, clean eating, or gluten-free. You can even have your shopping list sent directly to Walmart pickup at no charge, so your groceries are waiting for you. That's it. On with the show. Hi there, Carolyn. Welcome to Real Food for Real Life. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, Scott. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on the show. I know that I have enjoyed your cookbook, so I can't wait to kind of pick your brain about all things ketogenic.
Oh, good. Pick away.
Okay. Well, I think you do a great job at the intro of Everyday Ketogenic Kitchen, which is your cookbook, kind of explaining the nuts and bolts of the ketogenic diet. But for those of our listeners who are unfamiliar with, say, some of the more specifics of the ketogenic diet, just help us understand what that means. Are there different approaches to the ketogenic diet? Is it kind of one size fits all? Just kind of give us an overview.
Sure. I like to start off by saying our bodies are like flex fuel cars where we can use both glucose.
I like that.
Or ketones for fuel. And ketones are created when our bodies have carbohydrate restriction, and they're created out of fatty acids. The liver creates them, and our brain likes to use these as a form of fuel. Oftentimes, ketosis happens, a high level of ketones happens during starvation, but we're obviously not starving ourselves. We're eating very low carbohydrates and forcing our body to create ketones instead of using glucose for fuel. And it can fuel you. A lot of people say, oh, well, if you've ever been an athlete or a runner, you're supposed to carb load and create all this glucose. But ketones actually last better in your system, so that for long endurance kinds of like long marathons, ketones can actually fuel you through a little better, and you don't need the glucose. So it's just a really interesting thing, because we're sort of getting back to this now, where we realize, we don't need all that glucose floating around in our system. And so you eat very low carb, and it's called nutritional ketosis instead of starvation ketosis.
Okay, got it. Nutritional ketosis.
Yeah, and it's definitely not a one size fits all. I mean, my approach is what people call lazy keto, where I don't sit there and calculate every single amount of carbs and fat and protein that I'm eating. So I just kind of take it by how I feel and things like that. But there are some people who want to be very specific, and they want to know absolutely every single amount of whatever they're eating. So that's a different approach.
So when I see the phrase fat adapted, is that basically the same thing as being in ketosis?
It should be. I mean, it depends on the person, but yeah, I mean, I eat a lot of fat and I never shy away from, the fatty meats and the butter and cheese and things like that. And so, yeah, my body uses fat for fuel as opposed to glucose, which is really good for me because I'm a diabetic. So,
Right. Now, I have to stop right there and say that I think maybe for those who, again, are new to keto, what you just said, that you embrace fats, may seem a little startling. So,
yes.
I mean, I'm assuming there's a difference between, say, having a cup of ranch dressing each day and a healthy fat, right?
Sure, of course. I mean, first of all, ketogenic generally embraces a lot of fats, including animal fats and saturated fats, but we do shy away from sort of the man-made canola oils and vegetable oils that are actually not as good for us as we've been thinking for 50 or 60 years. But good fats from avocado oil and nuts and still butter and cheese. But yes, a cup of ranch dressing would not be on my daily menu.
Okay. So this is still at its core, above and beyond the tenets of a ketogenic diet. It's still about eating whole, unprocessed foods wherever you can. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And that should be, I mean, the thing is that these days there are tons and tons of people coming out with keto products and they're packaged, and you have to still be a label reader, and some of them are good because they rely on mostly whole foods, and some of them are, as cruddy as anything you could get.
Right.
Because keto is kind of a hot thing right now, so everybody wants to slap that label on their product. So yes, it should be about lots of meat and veggies and, high fat things that are natural, like avocados. And, yes, you don't want to fill up on, chip replacements that have tons of other things in them, so yeah.
Now, you have said before that you didn't choose keto, that keto chose you. What does that mean?
Well, I've never had a weight problem, so yay, lucky me. But I had gestational diabetes with my third child. And after she was born, because I was relatively active and slender, everybody expected it to just disappear. And it kind of seemed to at first. My glucose levels were in good shape. And then it started to creep back up because I had an endocrinologist who told me to test every so often. And I did. And I started to see things on the rise, which worried me. And so I did my research and decided that at this time it was only low carb. I hadn't even heard of a ketogenic diet,
right?
But that a low carb diet was the way to go. And I just started cutting my carbs more and more because the more I did, the better glucose control I had. And I discovered, I'm accidentally on a keto diet.
Right. So this is taking like the whole notion of insulin resistance to a new level through a ketogenic diet. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, yes. I don't think that I have insulin resistance. I'm not sure. It's hard to know with diabetes whether you're insulin resistant or whether your body doesn't produce enough insulin. So insulin resistance for your readers or for your listeners is when the body has plenty of insulin, but it won't uptake it into the cells. The cells are resistant to it.
Right.
So it's hard to know, without specific tests, what my particular situation is. But yeah, I think diabetes is one of these things that the first line of defense, both for type 1 and type 2, should be lowering your carbs because you're obviously intolerant to carbohydrates.
For whatever reason,
It should be treated similarly to any kind of intolerance, that you don't go to town. If you're lactose intolerant, you don't sit there and eat and drink a gallon of milk. So it's the same kind of concept. So
it sounds like you just said as much, that you were already kind of dialed into a low carb diet before you heard of anything related to a ketogenic diet. So your website, All Day I Dream About Food, I feel like that kind of focuses more on maybe your ketogenic lifestyle that was kind of more low carb, gluten free. And now has that transformed into more around the ketogenic diet?
Well, yeah, I think yes, in a way, I suppose early on when I started creating low carb recipes, I was, concerned mostly with my blood glucose and just keeping it lower. And that's what I watched. I didn't, necessarily count everything,
Right.
Or try to get my fat up there. And so, yes, there are certainly, but almost everything on my website is usually below 10 grams of carbs anyway. But nowadays, I think I look at it a little more carefully and try to keep things 7 and 5 grams and under.
Right. Right.
But I love dessert and dessert has, for me, a lot of readers love my desserts too. So, so for me, and everybody approaches this a little differently. Some people feel that, on a keto diet that they are triggered too much by sweets, so they avoid them completely, which is fine. For me, having a treat a day actually keeps me on track, because then I can sort of feel like, oh, I did well today and I'll have this little bit. But I still think, I hate to use the word in moderation, but because some people feel that keto means you can kind of eat, as long as they're keto foods, you can kind of eat them as much as possible. But I still feel like when it comes to the sweets, you do need moderation. So,
yeah. Well, one thing that you have alluded to a couple of times is activity, and you were already naturally lean toward fitness. One of the things that I've seen, and actually I had Dave Scott, who is in the Ironman Hall of Fame. He's a multi-winner of the Ironman in Hawaii on, and he is a huge proponent of a high-fat, low-carb diet for endurance athletes. And one of the things that even he said was that for mortals, that when you kind of are transitioning into a ketogenic diet, that you really needed to be careful kind of over-exercising, because that can, he said that could trigger these cravings for carbs, because your body is looking for carbs for fuel, but then we just have that kind of natural bent toward wanting to eat carbs. But he said that many times you have to kind of watch the amount of exercise that you do. And he said he had some athletes that he would train who are really great athletes that, he'd have to encourage them to really back off and maybe just walk rather than run or ride, to make sure that they could change their metabolism, basically. And so is there some truth to that?
I would say absolutely. So I think you used the term fat adapted, and that's exactly it. There is a transition period. And I think a lot of people struggle with the beginning of keto because you suffer through something called the keto flu, which you can mitigate the effects of that by making sure you're getting enough electrolytes and stuff. But you do feel kind of weird for a while, because your body is basically switching over from being burning glucose and burning sugars for fuel to burning fat for fuel. And it can take up to a couple of months to really see the changes and to see suddenly you have all this energy, but it can take a while. And so, when you start working out that way, like when I became a runner after my daughter was born. And at first I felt like I needed, if I was running a race, I needed glucose for it, and I'd eat a banana.
Yeah.
And then it started to, as I got more and more sort of comfortable and cut down my carbs more, I started to feel sick if I had carbs before a race, and I'd be in the middle of a race wanting to throw up. So I started to just not do that. And actually I ran my best half marathon fueled just by a three egg omelet. So,
wow. That's
so
incredible.
I think there's a transition period where you can feel pretty cruddy and you feel like your body isn't using, it's not using fuel efficiently because it's sort of confused at this point. And I could see it triggering a craving for carbs because that's what it's used to using. So I can see exactly what he's saying. And it does take time, but it's worth the switch.
Right. Well, now we don't want to scare anyone away who might be thinking about switching to a ketogenic diet.
Right.
And you used the Keto Flu, and we want to empower here and not scare away. So, in addition to electrolytes, what are some of the other strategies that you might be able to employ that might help to, as you said, mitigate some of the effects of the ketogenic flu?
Right. And I think when people use the term, like I never experienced it because I ended up cutting my carbs a little slowly when I was just first starting this. So people have talked about it, and I personally haven't experienced it to the degree that some people have. But you do have to be careful. You need to make sure you're taking in enough liquids and electrolytes, and salt is a big one. I think we've been so scared of sodium for so long in our diets, but salt is actually really critical. And so some people find that drinking these sort of salty drinks can actually really help with the keto flu. And magnesium is something that we're low on everyone in this
Right.
country. And actually, because we used to get a lot of it from the fruits and vegetables, but the soil is low on magnesium. So taking magnesium and potassium are pretty important too. I think people used to think you just had to suffer through the keto flu, but there are some really great resources on how to mitigate the effects of it and how to transition really well. And I'd say Diet Doctor is one of the best resources for that.
Great. We'll make sure we include that in our in the show notes. And so how long does this transition typically last? Is it 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks?
Oh, I think it really depends on the person. It really depends on the person. I think it depends on so many factors that you can't quite put your finger on. So there's no magic formula. But for some reason, they say they get some people say, oh, I had it for 2 days and I was done. But the transition to being totally fat adapted can take 6 weeks.
Right.
But
right.
in that time, that doesn't mean you're suffering through horrible cravings the whole time. There's so many great ways to sort of work on that.
Okay, good. We want to empower and encourage.
Yes, exactly.
So that's good to know.
Exactly.
That's good to know. So I think another one of those burning questions that we hear from our subscribers and listeners as it relates to not just the ketogenic diet, but that's specifically what we're talking about today, of course, but any kind of significant dietary changes. I mean, you are a busy mom. You've got kids. I mean, what does this look like for the rest of your family?
Well, I happen to have a second cookbook that just came out called Easy Keto Dinners. And that's kind of the topic because, you don't want to be cooking 2 meals. And I did that. I did a lot of cooking 2 meals simply because I felt like my kids wouldn't a lot of the stuff that I was giving them was quite low carb, but they wouldn't want the same flavors that my husband and I would want. We had more advanced palates, obviously. But then I just hit a point, my kids are a little older, where I said, I'm done. I'm cooking 1 meal a night. That's it. And so finding things that everybody likes, and there's plenty out there in terms of keto. I mean, so much. I have a couple of recipes in the book that are 15 minutes and under to make, as long as you sort of buy pre-cooked chicken, which is pretty easy these days. You go to a grocery store and you buy a rotisserie chicken, and the kids love them. So I don't have to worry about them. So there are choices out there that are applicable to everybody. You don't need to add the starch in you could, if your family's refusing keto and is insistent that they have their potatoes, you can cook them some potatoes. I personally think you're better off getting everybody some salad and some roasted veggies and calling that, okay, guys, we don't need the starch anymore. We can skip the potatoes. So, but I think you have to kind of change your perspective a little, and you have to change your family's perspective a little. And I think the hardest times for people are when they are doing it, but their partner isn't.
Yes, exactly.
And I do know that sometimes partners can be like hands down refusing to do it. And that makes it tricky. And you guys have to decide to do it together, or at least be supportive of each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Good advice. So the other thing that I need to ask is, we have a lot of moms and dads listening that have kids that are going, and whether it's after school activities or sports or gymnastics or you name it, then you've got, summer break coming up where you're traveling. So how do you handle snacks with your family?
Well, I keep a lot of low carby things around. We love, I don't know if you've ever seen these, but the Duke's pepperoni sticks. Gosh, I love those things. Okay. My kids love them too. So we keep those kinds of things around easily. And cheese sticks and pork rinds are very popular in the whole keto world for sort of a crunchy snack. Lots of nuts. I'm trying to think. When I make a batch of muffins, almond flour muffins, right, I'll make 2 batches and then they get shoved in the freezer. Keep a lot of nut butters around. And traveling is actually, one thing that we've started to do when we travel with family, like for a vacation, is we always make sure there's at least a kitchenette, or like a refrigerator and a microwave at least, so that we can kind of, and I take a lot of stuff with me. I've started to become kind of an expert at packing a few things in my suitcase and a few things in my carry-on for low carb. And then when it comes to restaurant meals, you do have to do some research. Sometimes you're not going to go to an Italian place that serves nothing but pasta. But yeah, there's definitely ways to do it, but it does take a little mental preparation. It doesn't necessarily mean you're in the kitchen cooking a ton of stuff meal prep wise all the time, although that works for some people. But it does mean that you kind of have to plan ahead a bit and be conscious of it.
A little more strategic, I would imagine.
Yeah. Which, to be honest, I mean, if you go on vacation and you don't do any research, then half the time you're eating junk anyway, and that's not great for any diet, no matter what you're on. So I think, planning ahead a little is always a good idea, no matter what diet you choose to follow.
So shifting gears just a little bit while we have a few more minutes, you obviously have a lot going on. You've got these cookbooks. So what's next in 2018 for All Day I Dream About Food? Are you just going to double down on the site? Do you have what can you share anything with us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always, my first love is creating the recipes. I'm doing more speaking engagements, which is really fun, but, and people seem to want inspiration from me, both from out in the kitchen and outside the kitchen, which is fabulous. But I love creating the recipes. So I'll always be posting recipes on my blog, but I have several cookbooks in the works now.
Nice.
So, which is really fun. And the next one, Easy Keto Desserts, comes out on July 3rd. So I'm excited about that one. And
can you at least give us a sneak peek into what kind of recipes we might see?
Oh, yeah. It was really a lot of fun for me to write because it was just so many good ideas in my head. For people who want to be dairy free, I turned my really popular peanut butter bars, which are on my site, on the blog already, I turned them into a dairy free version.
Nice.
And one of the recipes that I loved, and this is what a lot of what my readers really like too, is I like doing small batch recipes where it serves only 2, so you don't have a ton of leftovers. And I did a strawberry rhubarb crisp, which just was out of this world. So yeah, that was a good one. So. Okay,
Carolyn, listen, I'm starving to death. I think I'm in desperate need of something sweet now.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's the beauty of being able to talk to another food pro. I love hearing the inspiration and the ideas, and I can't help but get hungry. When can we expect to see that book released?
That book comes out on July 3rd. So,
fantastic.
Yeah, it's coming out soon. Yep.
Well, fantastic. Well, congratulations on all the exciting stuff that you've had going on this past year, 18 months, and really look forward to seeing the new book. And thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Really appreciate all the great advice and a little bit of a deeper look into the ketogenic diet. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Scott. That was wonderful.
You've been listening to Real Food for Real Life. Subscribe today and you'll never miss another episode. You'll also have access to past episodes with terrific guests ranging from cookbook authors to paleo experts, clean eating experts, to fitness pros. You can find us at itunes.com/podcast/Real Food for Real Life. And when you subscribe, be sure to leave us a review. You can also find us on other popular podcast apps like Stitcher and Google Play Music. If you have questions about this episode or our podcast, feel free to email me at community@emeals.com, or you can tweet them to me at Emeals using the hashtag #AskEmeals. To get more information on Emeals and our variety of meal plans, visit us at emeals.com. Until next time, I'm Scott Jones. Thanks for listening.